She did not weep. She remained motionless. She simply sat there, beside the suitcase. I was passing the rear entrance to the Santa Monica Pier, where the wind carried a gentle blend of ocean air and the sugary aroma from the boardwalk. It was about 10 a.m. The sun was high, and the tourist crowds were still sparse. That's when I saw her, a German Shepherd puppy, likely around 5 months old. Her coat, a mix of black and tan, was matted and dull with grime. One of her back legs appeared twisted at an odd angle. She was secured to an old bench with a red leash, sitting perfectly still next to a small, shabby pink suitcase adorned with faded unicorn stickers. A note taped to the leash read, "She's broken. I can't fix her. You try." I gazed at her. There was no barking, no tail wagging, only a pair of wide, glassy eyes that scanned the alley as if expecting someone's return. I crouched down cautiously. "Hey, what's your name?" I murmured. She gave no response. I glanced around. The area was deserted. There was nothing but the sound of waves, the wind, and this phantom of a puppy who seemed to have already surrendered. I unlatched the suitcase. Inside lay a child's t-shirt, a tiny collar, and a squash juice box. At one point, someone had cared, or had attempted to, but that connection was now severed. I contacted the shelter, informing them I would be bringing in a young German Shepherd puppy. "My name is Marcus, and I've dedicated years to dog rescue in LA. I've witnessed a great deal, but I was unprepared for this profound silence, this utter emptiness." When I lifted her, she offered no resistance, nor did she lean into the embrace. She just hung limp in my arms, a dead weight. Her gaze never left the street. In the car, I spoke to her in a soft voice. "You're not broken. Just waiting, right?" At the Santa Monica shelter, the team awaited us in the intake room. I handed them the note and the suitcase. They exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken thoughts we all shared. She stood still while they examined her. She had no microchip, showed signs of mild malnutrition, and had bruising on her hind leg that wasn't recent but was healing improperly. She didn't even flinch, only continuing to turn her head toward the open window. Waiting. My hands trembled more than I wanted to admit as I completed the intake form. For her name, I wrote Bella. It seemed to suit her. As I departed, I looked back. She was staring directly through the glass door, not at me or the staff, but toward the alley she had come from. Her eyes didn't blink. She didn't appear frightened. She appeared faithful. I've seen loyalty in many dogs, but this was different. This was not loyalty. This was grief, the kind that doesn't manifest in tears, but in waiting. I wished I could tell her that whoever abandoned her wasn't coming back, but I couldn't, because a part of me hadn't accepted it either. How long had she sat there? And who could peer into those eyes and simply walk away? On the second day, she still hadn't taken any food. Bella remained curled in the far corner of her kennel at the Santa Monica shelter, her head on her paws, her eyes open, wide open, just watching. I stood before her with a bowl of soft chicken and rice, a meal we often provide for puppies with delicate stomachs. She didn't stir, her gaze fixed past me toward the small window, as if the sound of the ocean might herald someone's return. "She's dissociating," Mara, one of the technicians, explained gently. "Dogs can do that when they emotionally shut down. They cease responding, as if they're not fully present." But she was present. I could sense her presence like a static charge in the air, silent, tense, and waiting. I sat cross-legged on the kennel floor, placing the food beside me. "I know you're not ready," I murmured. "I just want to sit with you." Her head didn't turn, but one of her ears twitched. It was a start. I once again took out the items from her suitcase. The tiny purple t-shirt with glitter on its collar, a juice box with the straw still attached, and an unused plastic dog brush. It all looked as though it belonged to a little girl, and it all appeared abandoned. Just like her. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside for a moment to get some air. I needed to clear my thoughts, but it was impossible. My mind was stuck on a single question. Who would tie a puppy to a bench like a piece of trash and leave a suitcase as if it were some sort of farewell present? Bella hadn't barked at all, not during intake, not during her checkup, not even at the other dogs. It was complete silence, but not the kind born of fear. It was the silence that follows after something has already been shattered. I went back inside to find her in the exact same position. Yet, when I opened her kennel, she didn't shrink away. She didn't greet me, either. She just allowed me to sit. An hour went by. I reviewed reports and sent a few texts, saying nothing. Then, a subtle shift occurred. She moved. Not much, just her nose. Gradually, she turned it toward the food bowl by my leg. I held my breath. She leaned forward, sniffed once, and then retreated. It was progress. I looked at her and whispered, "You're not invisible, Bella. I see you, and I'm not going anywhere." That night, before closing up, I stood at her kennel door and watched her one last time. She was still curled up, but this time, she wasn't watching the window. She was watching me. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was recognition. And that was a beginning. Perhaps she wanted it to be. By the third morning, there was a change in Bella's kennel. It was a small thing, just a crumpled blanket she had dragged 2 feet closer to the door. But it was significant. She was no longer hiding in the back corner. She was inching her way back to the world. When I entered with the familiar bowl of warm rice and chicken, her eyes met mine. They were still guarded, still silent, but they met my gaze. "Morning, Bella," I said quietly. "I missed you yesterday." She blinked once. I knelt and slid the bowl inside. This time, she didn't wait for me to leave. She rose slowly and stiffly, her injured back leg trembling slightly. She limped toward the food, sniffed it, and started to eat. Her movements were careful and mechanical, but she was eating. Mara walked by and stopped in her tracks. "She's eating while you're still in there?" I nodded. First time. She smiled as if she had just witnessed a small miracle. And perhaps we had. Later, as I was cleaning the kennels, I heard a soft rustling behind me. I turned to see her standing at the front of her kennel, not in the corner or behind her bed. She was observing me. I approached her slowly. "What are you up to, huh?" Keeping an eye on me. She didn't retreat. I extended my hand, palm up. She looked at it for a moment. Then, very gently, she leaned forward just enough for her nose to graze my fingers. The touch was electric, fragile and brief, but undeniably real. I spent my lunch break sitting by her kennel. We didn't speak. We just shared the quiet space. I read a book, allowing the silence to settle between us. At one point, she let out a long, shaky breath, the kind of exhale someone makes when releasing tension they've held for far too long. It was the first sound I had heard her make. That evening, I opened her suitcase again, not for myself, but for her. I placed the glittery t-shirt at the front of her kennel, next to her blanket. It felt like a necessary gesture, a bridge between her past and whatever was to come. That night, Bella walked over to it. She sniffed it once, then curled up around it, as if it were a sibling she longed for. I stood in the doorway long after the shelter had closed, watching her sleep, her paw draped over the soft cotton like a memory she wasn't quite ready to release. I understood then that she wasn't just waiting. She was remembering, and maybe, just maybe, she was starting to hope. The following morning, I discovered her sitting upright, not curled up or withdrawn, but simply sitting with her eyes open and her ears tilted slightly forward as I neared with her food. Her gaze tracked my every move to the kennel door. There was no fear or panic, only curiosity. "Good morning, Bella," I said softly. "Sleep okay?" She didn't reply, of course, but when I opened the door and set the bowl down, she walked toward me. Her limp was still noticeable, and her steps were careful, but she walked. Then she did something entirely unexpected. She looked up at me and wagged her tail just once, a slow, hesitant sway that felt thunderous. A German Shepherd puppy like Bella isn't meant for invisibility. They are born for connection, for protection, for belonging. And for the first time, she seemed to want to be seen again. I decided to take a chance and stepped into the kennel with her, making no sudden movements. I sat cross-legged and waited. She approached me cautiously, one paw dragging slightly, until she was near enough to sniff my shoe. "Do you want to go outside?" I asked as I reached for her leash. She didn't flinch. It was to be our first walk. We didn't venture far, just to the side yard behind the shelter where a small patch of grass was bathed in the morning sun. The yard was empty and peaceful. I sat on a low wooden bench while Bella explored, her nose to the ground and her steps uneven. She sniffed a leaf, then the fence. Then she looked at me, her ears perked, and took a step in my direction. I tapped the bench next to me. "You can come up here if you want." She didn't, not yet. But she sat down directly in front of me, close, her eyes searching mine. And in that moment, I saw her free from the weight of her past, without the suitcase, the leash, or the silence. She was simply a puppy. And for that instant, she felt like mine, even if only in spirit. When we went back inside, she walked into her kennel on her own, without any coaxing or fear. That afternoon, I opened her file and made an entry. Behavioral note, 4th day. Eye contact, tail wag, responded to voice, walked on leash, accepted proximity, name recognition, Bella confirmed. Then I added a sentence that wasn't standard protocol. She is choosing to come back to us. That night, after the lights were out, I walked back down the kennel row one last time. I paused at her door. She was awake, watching, and when I whispered, "Good night, Bella," she rested her head on her paws, and her tail tapped twice against the floor. By the 5th day, people began to notice her. Not the staff. We had all been observing Bella like a sunrise we were afraid to frighten away. I mean visitors, couples, families, and a few parents with children, all scanning the kennels for the right dog. But Bella wasn't showy. She wasn't bouncing off the walls like the terrier mix in Kennel 4. She didn't bark for attention like the Shepherd Lab puppy down the hall. She just sat there, ears pricked, calm and composed, with eyes that seemed to have already experienced a lifetime. Around noon, a young boy stopped outside her kennel. He was maybe 8 or 9, with curly hair and a Batman hoodie. He crouched down and whispered something through the bars. I couldn't make out the words, but Bella tilted her head, then rose, shaky but steady, and walked right up to him. His mother tugged on his sleeve. "No, honey. She looks sick." "She's not," he replied. "She's just sad." The mother gave a forced laugh. "We're not taking home a project, sweetheart. Let's go." They moved on. Bella sat back down, her gaze fixed on the spot where the boy had been. She didn't whimper, but her shoulders slumped slightly, like a balloon releasing a tiny puff of air. I clenched my fists inside my pockets. I wanted to yell after the woman. She's not a project. She's a survivor. But I remained silent. Later, I took Bella out back again. The sun was gentle, and the sky was just starting to shift into its golden hour hue. I had brought a worn tennis ball, just in case. She sniffed it, pawed at it once, and then sat down. I sat on the grass beside her. "You don't have to play," I told her. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for." She turned and rested her chin on my knee, and I froze. That small, trusting gesture cracked something open inside me, a part of myself I thought I had sealed off for good. I was reminded of Buck, my old German Shepherd. I remembered the way he used to do that exact thing, pressing his forehead against my leg as if to say, "I'm here. I trust you." Bella stayed like that for several minutes, still and warm. When I looked up, Mara was watching from the doorway with tears in her eyes. "She picked you," she mouthed. "But that wasn't part of the plan. I wasn't supposed to adopt her. The shelter had its rules, and I knew Bella needed more than I could provide. Still, in that moment, she wasn't just a rescued puppy. She was a heart learning how to beat again, and I wasn't sure if my own could let her go. It happened just after we had turned out the lights. I was locking the final door in the kennel wing when I heard the sound. A soft scrape on the tile, a brief pause, and then the unmistakable creak of the back door swinging open. Bella was gone. My chest tightened. For a second, I was paralyzed, my heart pounding in my throat. Then, instinct took over. I raced down the hallway, flashlight in one hand and keys jangling in the other. The door hadn't latched all the way. Someone must have overlooked it. She had pushed it open just enough to slip out into the darkness. She wouldn't go far, I reassured myself. She can barely run. But I already knew where she was going. I grabbed my truck keys and drove toward the beach, the tires squealing on the quiet Santa Monica streets. It was a short distance, less than a mile, but every second felt like an eternity. The wind was getting stronger, and a mist from the ocean was rolling through the alleyways. As I pulled up near the back of the pier, the very spot where I had first found her, my headlights illuminated something in the dark. There she was, sitting perfectly still. Same bench. The same leash was still clipped to her collar, trailing behind her. The pink suitcase was now in our shelter's supply room, but I could almost picture it sitting there beside her. She didn't flinch as I approached. She didn't even look at me, just kept her gaze fixed on the empty alley, staring down its length like a soldier on duty. I sat down next to her. For a long minute, neither of us moved. Then I whispered, "You really thought they'd come back, didn't you?" She blinked slowly. "You ran. Not to escape us, but to return to them." My throat grew tight. I looked out at the ocean, its surface shimmering under the streetlights, a sight too beautiful for this heartbreaking moment. "They don't deserve you, Bella." I said, my voice strained. But I do. That's when it happened. She leaned into me, pressing her shoulder against my leg. There was no hesitation. It wasn't a touch of memory, but a deliberate decision. I looped the leash around my wrist and stood up. Let's go home, girl. She followed me, limping slowly but steadily. Back at the shelter, I spread a blanket on the floor next to her kennel and lay down, my hand resting near her paw. She didn't sleep in the far corner that night. She curled up against my side, and sometime between midnight and dawn, she let out a soft sound, a low, contented sigh. It was not a sound of fear or sadness, but of peace. She had returned to the place where she was abandoned, and then she had chosen to come back to me. The next morning, Bella greeted me at her kennel door. She wasn't waiting in the corner or curled into a ball as she used to be. She was standing, wobbly, certainly, but proud. And when I stepped inside, she wagged her tail with a slow, steady rhythm. You're something else, I whispered as I clipped on her leash. We went outside for our walk, just as we did every morning now, but this time, she led the way. With her nose to the ground, ears alert, and eyes scanning the breeze, she seemed to be finally seeing the world instead of searching for ghosts within it. She sniffed every blade of grass, every tree, every bench. The wind ruffled her ears, and she didn't flinch. She looked alive. At the far end of the yard, she turned and stared at me, her tail swaying. Then she did something I hadn't seen before. She barked, just once, a sharp, confident sound that made the entire yard seem to freeze. Mara came running from the back in trance, her eyes wide. Was that Bella? I nodded, smiling. She just barked. It was like hearing your child speak for the very first time. From that moment forward, she began to reclaim things. She chose a favorite toy, a frayed rope with a green knot, and guarded it like treasure. She napped near the fence in the sunlight, her belly exposed as if she finally felt secure. She even started nudging other puppies, not yet playful, but curious and present. We adjusted her leg brace, and the vet informed us that the injury would continue to heal now that she was building strength. No signs of permanent damage, he said, surprised. This little German Shepherd puppy has a lot of fight in her. At night, she started sleeping at the front of her kennel, facing the door, waiting. Not for them, but for me. When I worked late, she wouldn't settle until she saw me walk past. One evening, I tested it. I stood out of sight, and there she sat, ears twitching, eyes fixed on the hallway until I came into view. Only then did she lie down, as if her job were done. She's imprinted on you, Mara said softly one night. You're her safe place. I wanted to say the words out loud. I want to keep her. But I couldn't. Shelter policy prohibited staff from adopting until a 30-day holding period had passed. And deep down, I knew she needed more than just me. She needed a home with space to run, with people who could be her entire world. Still, as I watched her press her head into my chest during our evening walks, I wondered how I would ever manage to let her go. Because now it wasn't just about rescuing a dog. It was about learning to believe again that broken things could become whole, that what is quiet isn't necessarily empty, and that maybe, just maybe, healing is a two-way street. They walked into the shelter just before noon, a quiet and unassuming couple who seemed unsure if they were in the right place. He was tall, likely in his mid-30s, dressed in a gray sweatshirt and running shoes. She wore a floral dress under a denim jacket, her soft eyes and nervous smile flickering on and off like a hesitant light. We're not here for a specific dog, she explained to Mara at the front desk. We just want to see who's here, who might need us. Mara nodded and then looked my way. Marcus, she called. Bella. My heart skipped a beat. I clipped on Bella's leash and crouched down in front of her. Let's go meet someone, okay? She stood up willingly. Her limp was still present, but she now moved with a newfound confidence and purpose. As we entered the visitation room, the woman let out a soft gasp. Bella froze, not out of fear, but with awareness. She observed them closely, her ears forward and her eyes steady. I gave the couple their space and sat quietly in the corner. The woman lowered herself to her knees and whispered, "Hi there." Bella didn't back away, nor did she rush forward. She walked slowly toward the woman, paused, and then sat down. She leaned in just enough to rest her nose on the woman's hand. Tears instantly filled the woman's eyes, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. The man crouched beside her, his voice low. She reminds me of us, he said. Quiet, guarded, still trying. He reached out, not to pet Bella, but to let her choose. She did. She moved closer to him and rested her chin on his leg. They remained like that for a long time. Later, in the staff office, the couple shared their story. They had been trying to have children for nearly 7 years. After countless treatments and heartbreaks, their doctor had told them last month, "You need to let go and make space for something else." "So, we came here," the woman said, not knowing what we were looking for. "But we saw her photo on the website last night, and something just stopped us." "She looked like she was waiting," the man added. "She was," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But not for them. For you." I told them about her first days, the bench, the suitcase, the silence, the bark, the first touch. They cried. They inquired about her care, her needs, and her leg. They didn't ask if she had been trained or if she knew how to sit, stay, or fetch. They asked what made her feel calm and what brought a hint of a smile to her face. Before they left, the woman knelt beside Bella again and said, "If you come with us, we won't try to fix you. We'll just love you. That's all." Bella looked at me, and then, without any command or cue, she wagged her tail twice. I knew she had chosen them. Now, all I had to do was learn how to let go. The first night without her was more difficult than I had anticipated. I tried to be rational, reminding myself that this is what we do: rescue, heal, and rehome, over and over again. It's the mission, the ultimate goal. But as I stood in the hallway that evening, staring at Bella's now empty kennel, a hollow feeling settled deep within me. I had already taken down her nameplate, folded her blanket, and placed her rope toy in a box labeled Bella Adopted. And yet, I kept glancing toward that kennel, as if she might suddenly reappear, her eyes watching me just as they used to. The couple, Sarah and Jonah, had come to pick her up that morning. They had brought a soft harness, a new pink leash, and a blanket that smelled of home. Bella allowed them to buckle the harness without any protest. She even wagged her tail when they opened the car door. She looked back at me once, not with fear, but with acknowledgement, as if to say, "Thank you. I'll take it from here." I managed a smile and a nod, forcing my jaw to remain tight. "She'll be okay," Sarah whispered, sensing my hesitation. "I know," I replied. And I did. But knowing doesn't make it any easier. Back at home, I tried to keep my mind occupied. I made dinner, watched some mindless television, and pretended the couch didn't feel colder than usual. But around 10 p.m., I found myself walking to the hallway where Bella's things were boxed up. I pulled out the suitcase, the same one I had found beside her on that first day, sun-faded, covered in glittery stickers, and still dented in the corner. I unzipped it. Inside was the small t-shirt. The juice box had been discarded, but the brush was still there. I held it in my hands and sat down on the floor. She wasn't just a dog. She was a story, a scar, a testament to what happens when someone is left behind and what is possible when someone else refuses to walk away. I sat there for a long time. The next morning, Mara greeted me at the door with a smile. "Check your phone," she urged. It was a video. Bella was lying on the couch between Sarah and Jonah, her head in Sarah's lap, her back legs twitching gently in her sleep. A warm blanket was tucked around her, and a fireplace glowed in the corner. The caption read, "She hasn't moved from our side all night. She's home. Thank you." I watched the video twice. Then I put my phone back in my pocket and went to work. As I passed Kennel 12, Bella's old spot, I paused, then turned and stepped inside. The new arrival, a 6-week-old mix, was skinny and scared, his eyes darting everywhere. He trembled as I approached. I didn't say anything. I just sat down slowly and waited, because now I understood what Bella had taught me. Sometimes, the first thing a dog needs isn't a command. It's someone who is willing to sit with them in the silence and stay. 3 days later, they returned with Bella. My heart stopped when I saw her walk through the shelter doors, her tail swaying and her eyes bright. She looked stronger, more self-assured. There was color back in her coat, more weight on her frame, and a steadier quality to her posture. Jonah smiled. She wanted to visit. Sarah added with a gentle laugh. We did, too. We thought maybe you had something of hers. I nodded and led them toward the office. Yeah, I kept the suitcase. I hadn't been able to bring myself to throw it out. It was stored in a cabinet behind my desk, untouched since the night I had last opened it. When I placed it on the floor, Bella sniffed it immediately. Her ears flicked back, then forward. She nudged it softly. Jonah crouched down beside her. Do you want to keep it, girl? Sarah looked at me. We don't want to erase her past. We just want her to know she doesn't have to carry it alone anymore. I was almost speechless. Instead, I pulled the little t-shirt from inside, still folded just as I had left it. This was in it. Maybe she'd like to have it with her, as a memory or for closure. I don't know. Bella leaned her head against my knee, a quiet, gentle pressure that conveyed not desperation, but recognition. Sarah's eyes shimmered. Can we keep it somewhere she can see it? Of course. They placed it on a small shelf in their living room. They told me later, right by the window where the morning sun would hit it. It wasn't a shrine or a symbol of grief, but a reminder that broken doesn't mean discarded, and that a difficult past doesn't mean a future without love. When they left the shelter that day, Bella looked back one more time, but not at the building, at me. Then she turned and climbed into the car without a moment's hesitation. The next morning, I opened my inbox to find a photo. It was Bella, curled up in a blanket by the window with her head resting on a stuffed bear. Behind her, on the shelf, sat the pink suitcase. The message read, "She knows she's safe now, and so do we." And for the first time since she had left, I didn't feel a sense of loss. I felt proud. Bella hadn't just been adopted. She had been chosen, loved, and understood. She had become more than a rescue story. She had become someone's new beginning. It was a quiet evening when I finally walked past her old kennel without slowing my pace. The new puppy inside, a beagle mix named Rusty, wagged his entire body upon seeing me. I crouched to scratch behind his ears, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the ghost of Bella lingering there, because she wasn't a ghost. She was home. Jonah and Sarah sent updates every few days, photos of Bella napping in sunbeams, walking along the bluffs in Santa Monica with her brace now off for short periods, and curled up on the bed between them, always making sure to touch both of them at once, as if she couldn't bear the thought of being apart. But one message I received stayed with me more than any other. It was a single photo of Bella sitting at the top of their staircase, her ears perked and her gaze fixed on the front door, waiting. The caption underneath read, "She still waits, not out of fear, but out of hope, for us to come home every day." I stared at that image for a long time, not because it made me sad, but because it brought a new understanding. Bella hadn't been waiting for someone to return and fix her. She had been waiting for someone worthy of her trust. And now, she had found them. One afternoon, Sarah called to ask if she could stop by. When she arrived, she came bearing cookies for the staff and something else, a framed photo of Bella, taken just 2 days before. In it, she was running across the sand, her ears flapping and her tongue out, captured mid-leap as if gravity had finally let her go. "We thought the shelter should have this," she said, placing it on the front desk. "For the next one, the next Bella." We stood there for a moment, looking at the photo, a perfect capture of sun, wind, movement, and life. She turned to me. "You gave her back to the world." I shook my head. She just needed the space to remember who she was. That night, I made my rounds through the kennels again. I stopped at Rusty's door. He barked once, wagged his tail enthusiastically, and then dropped his toy at my feet. I stepped inside, sat down, and just as before, I waited. Because now I knew that every story like this begins the same way, with silence, and with someone willing to sit inside it until the first wag appears. Some dogs are not broken. They are simply waiting for the right heart to truly see them. Bella didn't need fixing. She needed someone to sit with her in the quiet and to believe she was worth the wait. Her journey from abandonment to a loving home demonstrates how powerful that one choice can be, not just for her, but for everyone who opened their heart to a puppy who had once been left behind. This German Shepherd's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation highlights the critical importance of nonprofit rescue organizations. Caring for a rescued animal involves more than just love. It requires responsibility, patience, and dedicated pet care. Bella didn't find her perfect home in a single day. The process took time, gentle touch, and the slow building of trust. But when she finally ran across that beach, with her ears flying and her eyes smiling, she wasn't just running. She was free. If Bella's story moved you, consider sharing it. Because somewhere out there, another puppy is sitting alone, waiting, not for a miracle, but simply for someone who won't walk away.